Daria Bulba always aspired to a life full of bright events and opportunities. From childhood, she dreamed of becoming a famous model, seeing her face on the covers of glossy magazines, and participating in fashion shows. Growing up in Odessa, surrounded by a loving family, she was confident that she could achieve her goals. Her parents, Sergey and Natalia, always supported her in all her endeavors, proud of their daughter's successes. From a young age, Daria stood out among her peers with her appearance and charisma. Her tall stature, slender figure, and expressive facial features did not go unnoticed, and by the time she graduated from school, she was already participating in local photo shoots and advertising campaigns. These first steps in the modeling business only strengthened her determination to pursue a career in this direction. After finishing school, Daria enrolled in the Odessa College of Hospitality, choosing the specialty jurisprudence. Although this profession seemed stable and practical, her heart was always filled with a passion for fashion and art. She skillfully combined her studies with a modeling career, gradually building a reputation and receiving collaboration offers from well-known brands. Photo shoots for various magazines and participation in commercials became her regular activities. By the time she graduated from college in 2015, Daria had already managed to work in several European countries, such as Italy, Greece, and Turkey. She enjoyed the opportunity to travel and learn about new cultures, which further fueled her desire to broaden her horizons and take her career to the next level. China became Daria's next big goal. She was attracted by the prospects that this market could offer, the high demand for foreign faces in advertising, the opportunity to work with major international brands, and the potential to collaborate with global fashion houses. The contract with a Shanghai modeling agency, signed in April 2016, seemed like the perfect opportunity to realize her ambitions. Shanghai welcomed Daria with open arms. The city that never slept was full of energy and opportunities. It lured her with its endless neon-lit streets and towering buildings that reflected the dynamics of modern life. Every morning, she woke up with the feeling that her life was just beginning and that great things awaited her. She quickly integrated into Shanghai's modeling industry. Daria worked with major Chinese brands, participated in fashion shows, and was constantly busy with photo shoots. Despite her busy schedule, she always found time to stay connected with her family and friends. Daria shared her successes with them, sent photos from shoots, and talked about her plans. However, despite the outward success, a growing sense of unease began to take root inside her. Daria started receiving strange messages from unknown numbers. At first, she took them as a joke, but soon her concern grew. Someone persistently invited her to meetings but did not show up at the appointed time. She talked about it with her friend Svetlana, with whom she shared an apartment, but Svetlana dismissed it as insignificant. Daria continued to ignore these messages, focusing on her work and goals. Her career in Shanghai was on the rise, and nothing seemed to foreshadow trouble, but the anxiety she felt remained with her, as if it was a premonition that something was about to go wrong. Shanghai, this city of millions of lights and endless movement, quickly became more than just a place of work for Daria Bulba. It was the embodiment of all her dreams, but also a source of hidden threats that she could not yet comprehend. Daria felt like part of this huge metropolis, but at the same time, she couldn't shake off a strange sense of alienation. Every day she went to shoots, participating in advertising campaigns and fashion shows, her career progressing rapidly. The Shanghai modeling agency with which she had signed a contract provided her with excellent conditions, a spacious apartment, a good salary, and a steady stream of work. But despite the success, Daria couldn't fully relax. The city that promised her a future also concealed many dangers. Shanghai was multifaceted, and behind its glossy exterior, shadows lurked that she only vaguely sensed. The locals, her colleagues, they were all friendly, but Dasha often caught herself under intense gazes, and not all of them were kind. On August 6, 2016, the day began like any other in Daria's life. She was going to meet a friend she had mentioned to Svetlana the night before. Svetlana only remembered the name. Daria did not go into details, and her friend did not ask any further questions. At that time, it seemed insignificant. Before leaving, Daria spent a long time choosing her outfit, paying attention to every detail. She always cared about her appearance, and today was no exception. The habit of looking impeccable was second nature to her. As she dressed, she cast a quick glance in the mirror and was satisfied with her reflection. Her face was glowing, as usual, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. Before leaving the apartment, Daria checked her phone one more time. There were no messages from Lee, but that didn't surprise her. They had agreed to meet at a specific place, and she was confident that he would come. Dasha told Svetlana that she would be back by evening, and, smiling, she left the apartment. Svetlana continued with her activities, not giving it much thought. Daria headed to the meeting place on a busy street near the waterfront. Time passed, but Lee never showed up. She waited, checking her phone every few minutes, but there were no messages. After a while, Daria decided to take a walk along the waterfront to pass the time and think. She didn't know that this day would become a turning point in her life. The waterfront was crowded, with people strolling and enjoying the summer evening. Daria walked along the river, listening to music in her headphones. She tried to distract herself from the disappointment of the missed meeting, but the sense of unease that had followed her all day grew stronger. Surveillance cameras captured her walking along the waterfront, occasionally stopping to admire the view. She danced a little to the music, trying to lift her spirits. But then something strange happened. Daria suddenly disappeared from the camera's view. The last frame showed her walking toward a zone not covered by cameras. After that, her trail vanished. In the evening, when Daria did not return home, Svetlana began to worry. She knew that her friend always informed her if she was delayed. Several messages and calls went unanswered. Svetlana tried not to panic, reassuring herself that perhaps Daria had simply forgotten to charge her phone or had stayed out longer with her friend. But the night brought only anxiety and uncertainty. The next morning, August 7, when Daria still hadn't appeared, Svetlana decided to act. She contacted the police, explaining the situation and providing all possible details. The police responded quickly, understanding that in a city as vast as Shanghai, every hour counted. An official investigation began. While the police checked surveillance cameras and questioned witnesses, Svetlana couldn't find peace. She called all of Daria's acquaintances, posted messages on social media, hoping for any information. Soon it became clear that no one in her circle knew who Lee was, the person Daria was supposed to meet. As time passed, Svetlana's anxiety grew. The police informed her that Daria was last seen on the waterfront, but after that, her trail disappeared. They checked all possible routes she might have taken, but no other camera caught her. It was like a mystery with no solution. Daria Bulba's disappearance became increasingly inexplicable. Shanghai, a city with millions of inhabitants, suddenly seemed not as safe as it once did. Svetlana didn't know what to do next, and the only thing she could do was wait for news from the police. Daria's disappearance shocked everyone who knew her. Upon hearing the alarming news, her parents immediately took action. They contacted the Ukrainian embassy in China, sought the help of lawyers and private detectives, and tried to attract as much attention to the search as possible. Daria's father, Sergey, was ready to do everything in his power to find his daughter, despite the thousands of kilometers that separated them. The Shanghai police began an official investigation immediately after receiving the missing person report. Chinese law enforcement worked efficiently, but each new circumstance only complicated the picture. Initially, they considered several versions: abduction, an accident, or voluntary disappearance. However, none of them found confirmation. The first thing that struck the investigators was the absence of any signs of struggle or panic. The last surveillance footage showed Daria walking along the waterfront in her headphones, without any signs of fear or danger. She was dancing and smiling. It seemed she was just enjoying the evening. But suddenly, as if by magic, she vanished. The police meticulously studied Daria's route, checking all the cameras on nearby streets, but nowhere was she seen continuing her walk. This seemed impossible in such a densely populated and monitored city as Shanghai. At some point, the investigators began to doubt their own version of events. Perhaps Daria never left the waterfront, but even this hypothesis found no confirmation. One of the first theories suggested by the police was that Daria might have been abducted. But how could this have happened in the middle of a crowded street remains a mystery. Not a single camera in the area recorded any suspicious activity. There was no evidence that someone approached or tried to grab her. This only added to the questions in an already complicated case. Another theory was suicide. The cameras recorded Daria approaching the river. Then she disappeared. Investigators suggested she might have jumped into the water. However, after a thorough examination of the riverbed, no evidence was found. The water was calm, and if Daria had drowned, her body would have surfaced, but nothing like that happened. During the investigation, other oddities began to emerge. Initially, the police focused on verifying the identity of the mysterious lie, with whom Daria was supposed to meet. But it turned out that none of her colleagues or acquaintances knew a person by that name. All attempts to establish his identity through phone numbers or social media were unsuccessful. Lai's identity remained a mystery, and soon investigators began to doubt whether he even existed. Another strange fact was that the day after Daria's disappearance, her phone continued to receive messages from the same unknown number as before. The messages were short and disjointed, containing no important information, but creating the impression that someone was still monitoring the situation. The police tried to trace the source of the messages, but this proved difficult. The phone number used proxy services, making it significantly harder to track down. Daria's parents were horrified. They couldn't understand what had happened to their daughter. Sergey and Natalia repeatedly communicated with the police, demanding more active measures. But each time, they encountered the same dead end. No one could explain how a girl could simply disappear in the center of Shanghai without leaving a trace. As the investigation dragged on, speculation in the media began to surface. Journalists wrote about mysterious disappearances and criminal groups involved in human trafficking. Various versions, including the most incredible ones, were discussed on forums. Some claimed that Daria might have become a victim of experiments. Others spoke of alien abduction, but all these versions were far from reality. The most frightening version, which the police later revealed, suggested that Daria had been kidnapped for the purpose of being sold into slavery. This theory was actively supported by some detectives and public figures, claiming that such cases were not uncommon in large Asian cities. However, there was no evidence to support this theory either. Daria's parents, constantly under stress, tried to find support from international organizations and other families who had faced similar tragedies. But time passed and no new leads appeared. Daria Bulba, a young model full of hopes and ambitions, seemed to have vanished into the bustling and boundless Shanghai, leaving behind only questions and the unanswered pain of her loved ones. One day, Natalia discovered a message on social media from an unknown person claiming to have seen Daria in one of Shanghai's nightclubs. This person described her appearance so accurately that there was no doubt he really had seen their daughter. But as soon as they tried to contact him, the message disappeared and the account was deleted. This only intensified their suspicions. Someone knew more than they wanted to reveal. Meanwhile, rumors continued to spread on the forums. Some people claimed to have seen Daria in the company of suspicious men. Others said she might have become a victim of an international criminal syndicate. These stories resembled scenes from movies, but her parents couldn't ignore even the most insane theories. With each passing day, they felt more pressure. Their search began to delve into dark corners they hadn't even suspected. Daria, it turned out, had been living a double life full of secrets, and her disappearance could be just the tip of the iceberg. It seemed they didn't know their daughter as well as they thought, and now they were left to wonder what other secrets her past held. As time went on, the situation became more and more confusing. Daria's parents, Natalia and Sergey, found themselves in a desperate position. On the one hand, they were forced to trust the official investigation. On the other, they were increasingly convinced that their daughter had fallen victim to something much more complex and sinister than a mere disappearance. Sergey, not losing hope, enlisted the help of a private detective known for his experience in handling complex international cases. This man, Ivan Gorbunov, had a solid track record in finding missing persons, and his methods were marked by meticulousness and persistence. Gorbunov immediately took on the case, trying to find what the police had missed. He began with a thorough examination of all aspects of Daria's life, from her professional connections to her personal relationships. One of the detective's first steps was to establish Daria's exact route on the day of her disappearance. He carefully reviewed the surveillance footage provided by the police during the investigation. Gorbunov paid attention to small details that might have escaped others, unusual movements of people around her, possible signals or signs. However, despite all his efforts, his conclusions were the same as those of the police. Daria disappeared in a camera blind spot, and none of the footage gave even the slightest hint of her whereabouts. Gorbunov also tried to unravel the mysterious messages Daria received before her disappearance. He studied the phone records, checked the number from which the messages were sent, and tried to contact the presumed sender. However, the number turned out to be registered to a fictitious person, and the trails leading to it quickly disappeared into a web of fake data and false leads. This was yet another dead end. The detective's doubts grew with each new step. It seemed to him that the case was not so much about specific people or events, as it was about something more global, possibly an international network involved in human trafficking. However, none of his contacts in the criminal world could confirm this version. Gorbunov began to suspect that Daria might have been drawn into something much more complex and dangerous than just the modeling business. In the course of his investigations, Gorbunov came across information about several other models who had also disappeared under similar circumstances. These cases had not received much public attention, but were eerily similar to Daria's story. The models were typically young, ambitious, and had come to China with high hopes for their careers. All of them vanished, leaving behind only vague traces and a multitude of questions. One of these models, Maria Ivanova, was found several months after her disappearance. She was discovered in a deplorable state in an underground club on the outskirts of Guangzhou. She remembered almost nothing about what had happened to her, but her story was filled with hints of violence and coercion. Gorbunov managed to contact the people who had worked on her case and tried to gather more details. What he learned was horrifying. Maria had been kidnapped and forced to work in conditions that could hardly be described as humane. This information only strengthened his suspicions. Daria could be in a similar situation, and if that were the case, time was running out. Gorbunov understood that he needed to act quickly, but each step only brought more questions and an increasing sense of despair. Every lead he found seemed to go nowhere, leaving behind only a murky web of ambiguity and fear. Gorbunov's investigations led him to the dark side of Shanghai, the part you won't see on tourist postcards. Shanghai is not just skyscrapers and luxury stores. It's also a place where shadow markets, underground clubs, and illegal enterprises thrive. In this vast city, beneath its glossy surface, there was a world full of danger and secrets. Daria also mentioned the name Mikhail, the very man who had offered her the contract in Shanghai. He turned out to be a middleman in this dark scheme. Mikhail knew what was really going on and had deliberately lured Daria into the trap. But once she was ensnared, her life became a living hell from which it seemed there was no escape. Hearing her story, Gorbanov realized that he was uncovering not just a personal tragedy, but a part of a larger criminal mechanism. He decided to continue the investigation to expose everyone involved in this horrifying business. However, he also understood that Daria and her family needed time to recover from what had happened. Natalia and Sergey flew to Shanghai a few days after receiving the news of their daughter's rescue. The reunion at the airport was filled with tears and embraces. Daria returned to her family, but she faced a long road to recovery. She was physically and mentally broken, and the coming months would be a time of struggle against the nightmare she had endured. Meanwhile, Gorbanov handed over all the gathered materials to international law enforcement agencies, which launched an investigation into human trafficking in Asia. This case received widespread attention, and soon many members of the criminal network were arrested. However, despite this, there were still questions left unanswered. As for Mikhail, he vanished without a trace as soon as the arrests began. No attempt to find him succeeded, and his fate remained unknown. It's quite possible that he managed to disappear thanks to his connections and continues his activities elsewhere. This unresolved mystery added a dark shade to Daria's story. She was saved, but the threat that had consumed her still lingered in the shadows. Upon returning home, Daria tried to rebuild her life, but every day reminded her of what she had been through. The memories haunted her, and even years later, she couldn't forget what had happened to her. Her story became a reminder of how fragile human lives are and how easily they can be shattered. Gorbanov, having completed his investigation, kept only one photograph, a picture of Daria reunited with her parents. It was his small victory in the great battle he waged against evil. But he knew that this story was not over, that there were still many who needed help and rescue. Daria Bulba's story remained unresolved to the end. She was saved, but the shadows of the past continued to follow her. Answers to many questions remained in the dark, and no one could say what would have happened if Gorbanov had not arrived in time. But one thing was clear. This story showed how dangerous and cruel the world could be, and how important it was to fight for the truth, no matter how difficult and painful it might be.